Hello and welcome everyone to Deal, Designers Earn a Living. This is our kickoff panel this evening, and we're going to have Julianne start in just a second by getting started and introducing and thanking our benefactors, and then we will introduce our panel and we will jump right on into the questions. So Julianne, I'm going to let you go ahead and take over for a moment.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to thank our chapter benefactors for 2021. Their contributions and support of this chapter make events like this possible. I wanted to specifically acknowledge our Paramount benefactors, Sherwin-Williams, Dauphin, Transwall, and Technion, as well as our top-level firm benefactor, HDR. There are tons of other good people on the list. They're going to have CEUs happening throughout the year, as well as some other fun benefactor hosted events. So keep an eye out for that. And you can always find the most recent up-to-date information on our website. Thanks everyone for coming to our kickoff event for Deal. I'm really excited to have this discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julianne. So my name is Caitlin Gassert, and I'm the VP of Student Affairs for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. And I'm going to invite Shakira. Will you please introduce yourself, give us a little bit of bio about you, and then we'll roll into Stephen and then Taryn.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Happy to be a part of this discussion and to kind of spend some time with you guys tonight. I am Shakira Hunt, and I am the owner and creative director for Shakira Hunt Creative. We are a branding and lifestyle photography studio based here in Wilmington, Delaware. I come from the design background and, have gone to art school for interior design, previously worked at interior and architecture firms, and then I recently took the leap into full-time entrepreneurship through my own practice with a focus on branding photography. And still practicing design work within that niche. So happy to be here, and yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephen.
That's my cue. Thank you for having me tonight. Stephen Garrison. I am an associate professor of interior architecture at Marywood University in Scranton. My background is actually in fine arts, in painting and art history, but for the past 20 years, I've found myself teaching in interior architecture. But I also am president of a nonprofit organization called University Hall of Innovation that runs design challenges for university students around the country. And more recently, we started a webcast 2 years ago called The Student's Perspective, where my students interview people in the industry, whether it's manufacturers, designers, kind of influencers, design celebrities and whatnot, to kind of find out how they got to the points that they did in their own careers and the choices that they've made kind of throughout their lifespan.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen. Taryn.
Hi, yes. My name is Taryn Delas Reyes. I am the Director of Interior Design at Clark Caton & Hinst, located in Trenton, New Jersey. I have been in the industry for over 15 years. And just as an interior designer, now I'm in the role of a director, and have had, I guess, 2 firms before that. I have had a lot of experience in different things. And I think part of the discussion tonight and kind of pivoting and understanding economics and how employment works has led me to have a vast resume of different types of interior design, specifically commercial. But I think one thing jumped to the next. And so I'm looking forward to the discussion this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you. So my first question, whomever wants to jump in on that, is what would you go back and tell your fresh graduated self if you could roll back the clock? Anybody? Steven, Shakira, Taryn?
Sure, I'll jump in on that because it's actually one of the questions that we ask all of our guests as well to hear their viewpoints on it. And inevitably, every guest that we have on will answer not to be so stressed. But for me personally, I think it becomes not to focus on what you think are your limitations, not to let the limitations or the kind of boundaries of maybe even what your degree says on your diploma kind of define what your potential is. Kind of be open to all the experiences that you had, all the things that you have done, all of the skills that set you apart that will allow you to do just about anything. I think that taking advantage of opportunities that either that come before you or things that you can create for yourself, I think are important as well. I mean, so few students really kind of grasp everything that they possibly can at that time, and always look back and be like, oh, I wish I had done more. I wish I had participated more, those kind of things. So those are kind of the few things that we usually hear and kind of fit from my own experience.
Yeah, I think I would piggyback off of that and say to just release some of the pressure from, having this like idea of what I feel like we want, or have this understanding that, I want to work at like XYZ firm and do XYZ. And I think a lot of the times we have this idea of what we want, but then we get into these roles and positions and, it might not be what is actually for us. And so I think I would just release some of that pressure to not feel so like, if I don't get this, it's the end of the world kind of thing. Because I think I kind of went into the industry with that mindset of, okay, well, now I'm graduated. I need to have a job. I need to earn an income. What's next? And that did happen for me. And luckily I was able to land work, because I know that may not have been the experience for many, especially depending on the time in which you were going into the workforce. But I think if we can just go with the flow of things a bit more and kind of just relieve ourselves of that pressure and like idea of what we think is for us, and it'll just help with where we'll actually land,
I think for me, I think it's more about being open, and maybe that you should just be open to whatever experience and whatever job experience might be out there for you. Because I guess for me, I kind of just rolled into a position. I don't know that I knew I wanted to work in the commercial field rather than residential. I did know that, but I moved from very different types of genres, just and one led to the next, that led to the next. And anything that I learned from the first job to the second job led me to this particular position, which I feel out of all the three positions is probably the most ideal, and more what I had in my mindset. So I think just be open to what the experience is, be open to the, gaining that experience, the knowledge, and whatever that might come. You don't have to be there forever necessarily. You could switch jobs once you gain, some footing there. So it's not forever. So I think take it what it is and be open to it, because no matter what it is, it'll help you moving forward in your career.
Agreed.
And pulling from things that are helpful, do you feel that there was a skill set or maybe something that fueled your, the passion side of you that has helped your career or has taken it Shakira, most definitely, there's something that has taken you in a different angle, but that question's for everyone.
I think it's really more of like a personality trait than anything, and that's just optimism. For me personally, I made a huge shift, but not completely outside of the realm of creativity. Design is still linked back to creativity in some sense. It just was a bit more commercialized for me, I would say commercialized and corporate, but and I felt like I didn't get to fully express what it was that I was wanting to do at that time. And so having that urge, spiritually, I knew that there needed to be some kind of shift, which led me to explore photography in the first place. And so after exploring that, I'm an optimistic person by nature. So just kind of being open-minded, like you said, Taryn, to various things, various avenues of work, and just like being able to experiment with different things and just being curious about other art forms ultimately led me to where I am now. So I would definitely say, like, I'm not sure what skill that would be, but definitely personality wise, it's just being open-mindedness and optimistic about things for sure.
I think for me, I had a particular skill, but I think I have a thirst for knowledge. So once I landed that first job, like I ended up going back to community college and taking more, CAD classes and SketchUp classes. So I always kind of had this idea of being better than, I can't do this. I need to figure this out. I need to get a book on this. I need to hone this skill so that I can be more proficient at my particular job, and my everyday work load. So for me, I think I had a pretty good full package, but I did feel afterwards needed to kind of exemplify on that and continue to take just classes here and there, easy stuff that I could take one during a semester, like after work on a Tuesday or whatever. And it helped me in my everyday work environment. So I think that was helpful for me. So I just continued to hone my small set of skills to be bigger as I went along.
Yeah, on my end, I think it was getting past maybe preconceptions or limitations that you put on yourself. I think going from when I came out of art school, I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and I studied painting, and I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a gallery artist, and I did that. I had that part of my life, and kind of after a while decided that's not where I wanted to be. Went into teaching and found myself teaching studio arts, and things started to open up. And our university has many different majors that kind of within under our umbrella, and I was working with art education students and art therapy students and interior students, and found the thirst for kind of knowledge and the thirst for skills with some of those students, as opposed to kind of the painting students or the sculpture students who maybe they imposed their limitations of what they could do. Really started to interest me. And so when the opportunity came to make the switch from studio art into interior architecture, it was a no-brainer. And people to this day who I talk with in the art department kind of still ask me, well, don't you miss it? Don't you want to teach? And I was like, well, no, because every time I bring something, a new skill set or a new thing, it's like the students are just sponges. They want to know more because they haven't been necessarily exposed to it in the same way. And so they're looking to see how they can take that and pull it into their own kind of body of knowledge and whatnot. And so yeah, it's just not limiting yourself, not establishing those boundaries, but kind of pushing through them.
I definitely think, having that open mind and that curiosity. And I think a lot of people in our industry, I think that's one of the things that makes it unique, is that we're forever learners. There's always new, better, greater things or better benefits to the end users in the space. So what are your thoughts as far as, continuing education? Do you personally feel, or have you found that there was some type of economic happenings, whether it was financial, whether it was, not another pandemic, or maybe you are currently, but was there something that spurred you to seek further education, whether it was just a class like Taryn was taking here and there, or that spurred you to go for your master's or so on and so forth?
I can definitely say that this pandemic experience, and I don't know if it's an age thing too, because I for sure did not have the desire to do any sort of continuing education, but like now more and more, like just with business practices and just wanting to develop myself through the business, I've been more interested in like business development courses and really just understanding like, just having this strong urge to like take social and society kind of classes and courses to just understand us and how we move through the world. So that was in me, like, I don't know if it was just me sitting and being completely bored with not having anything to do at first during the pandemic or when we were all quarantining early March last year. But I had the strongest urge to like take some kind of course, and I wanted to explore it in so many different ways. But yeah, I had that urge for sure. And what I did was, and even for myself within my own practice, I just felt like I wanted to teach. And I think that happened for a lot of people too. Like, now that we have this time, how are we using it? Can we create Can you guys hear me?
Now you're back. You froze there for a second.
Not sure how that happened, but yeah. So I just had the strongest urge to either teach a workshop, take workshops, and I just kind of enrolled in everything that I saw that was interesting. If it was a Zoom meeting or on wellness or a workshop on, how to keep your business going or how to shift or pivot and all of those things, I was taking it just because I felt like I needed to just soak up all of these things because, when we come out of this or as we progress through it, these are new tools, these are new resources that I'm building and new relationships that I'm creating with other creative entrepreneurs and other folks that I could lean on as just like, hey, I have a question. Do you have time for this? Or, just as a resource. So, and just building community around that was really helpful.
I think a little bit for me, I think being an interior designer in a firm and working actively with clients all the time, for me, during the pandemic, I was very drawn to CEUs and things that I could use as talking points when I'm speaking to clients, whether it had to do with topical treatments to fabric or, just different layouts and how the world is progressing now and how, we do a lot of work with higher education. How can that apply in this particular situation? So gaining some knowledge about finishes and just different things relative to the current pandemic situation that would help me to better inform my client and, help us as a firm for me being knowledgeable of those things. Also being at home, I think has been amazing. I'm not in love with the idea of being in a pandemic, but like sometimes I have to just stop and like think about the positive things. So, I live in Middletown, New Jersey, and I work in Trenton, New Jersey. So I literally travel right across the state, which is a lot. So that time frame of not having to go to the office, I thought like, how can I better myself in this? So I set some goals for this year. And one of those is to take the well exam. And because I have some extra time now at home, like how is it that I can exemplify on that time, better myself, forward myself in my career? What are the steps or the things that can benefit me and my firm moving forward in this environment and for the future? So I think kind of staying in that mindset helped me a little bit not to get on the depressed side of things and just being at home and feeling crappy about myself. At least it's like, okay, I have a goal. This is where I'm working at. It refocused my energy on something more positive. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we've all been in some ways forced to slow down and to kind of reevaluate kind of what is important to us and those sorts of things. So yeah, we've had opportunities that maybe we wouldn't have had or wouldn't have been able to take up to this point. And I mean, as a teacher, it's lifelong learning is definitely like what I would stress about everything. But we're constantly trying to find the next thing, the next the next information that we can give to the people that we are around and we deal with. And having children, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what can I now give to them, and how can they build? And so it's lifelong learning is extremely important. I know, I mean, one of the things that we was kind of put out was talking about like what sort of levels those are, whether it's, are you going back to get a master's, or you're going back to get just certifications, or you're just taking classes. And that's the type of thing that's, it's such a personal thing, because you have to evaluate like what are you looking to get out of it? Are you looking to mid-career make a switch? Are you looking to focus on something that you're going to know more than anybody else does? Do you have a desire to go and to teach? And that's, you have to kind of weigh all that stuff in to kind of figure out, okay, how do I want to do this? I know every year when I have my graduating seniors that ask me, it's like, okay, what should I do? Should I go to grad school? What? And I have to have that conversation and say, well, why would you want to do it? I said, if you're thinking about it, I suggest doing it now, because it's once you go out into the field, it's going to be so hard to kind of pull back and say, now I'm going to leave the job, I'm going to take all this extra time off to be able to do these things. And so, yeah, it is a tough decision to make, of saying, okay, I'm going to put off another 2 years, or what's going to happen. But it's, I think if everyone can kind of just acknowledge, like, okay, yeah, what do I want at the end of this? I think that'll help to kind of figure out where you want to be from there.
Definitely some good advice. Kind of backing out and taking a look, and where do I want to go? What is my career path? Things like that. So that's part of, I'll put a couple of plugs in there for some later on deal topics, but in June, that's what we're going to be talking about, is career pathing. Taryn, it's great that you've kept such a positive mindset. For those of you who are watching who maybe don't keep as much of a positive mindset, or have found yourself in kind of like a negative loop, we've all had those days, I'm sure. I can definitely speak for myself, where there's some days where I'm like, man, pandemic life is getting to me. So we have a mental, yeah, Taryn, we have a mental health march coming up. So there's a couple of installments there. But Stephen, you've been giving a lot of advice to your students. So and this is for all of the panelists, but what is some of the best, and then what is some of the worst advice you've received, whether you were a student or just, kind of as you're traveling along in your career?
So I had thought about this, and I think, so for me, growing up in my family, sports was always a big thing for us. And my father coached me in just about every sport we ever did, and my older brother. And so that was our time to be together. And my dad always looked at it as, no matter what we were doing, even if he didn't really know it, he was going to figure out how to coach us. And so one of his quotes that I always remember is do something even if it's wrong. And so looking back on that, it's thinking, okay, waiting for something to happen is never going to be the optimal way to approach life. You have to be proactive about it. You have to recognize what's out there and do a little bit of searching on your own. You have to take the initiative. You have to take a step forward and then kind of react to what happens from there. And even if it ends up not being the right thing, it's going to lead you to that next thing, which very well could be your forever thing. But it's without making that first step, nothing is ever going to happen. And conversely, that there's no single point of bad advice that I think I've ever gotten, but I think the worst advice anyone could ever give to me, and it becomes maybe just a me thing, but it's that challenge of somebody telling me that I can't do something, or that it's just not going to work. I mean, I take that as that becomes a challenge of like, oh, okay, well, let's come back and talk to me and see what happens. But yeah.
That's good. I could definitely say the same with, like, I'll start with the worst advice. I've been told that I do a lot or do too much. And I do. I'm a very, very busy person. I like to keep my attention to a lot of different things, and I spread my energy to lots of different things. And yes, it can be absolutely draining and like taxing sometimes, but I am very intentional about how I build in my leisure time when I need to have that to separate and make space and to have some kind of balance and structure to things. But I have been told that several times. And I think that's the worst thing that somebody can ever say to me, especially the type of person that I am, because why would I limit myself? You know, I think everybody can do what they can do, and they know their limits, and they know when they can push forward with things. So I don't think it's fair to say, or, you know, kind of project our own limitations on to other folks. So I would definitely say that's the worst. And the best advice I would say from like a previous instructor when I was a student was to be curious. That was from my thesis professor, Pierre. Shout out to Pierre at Moore. I miss him. I miss those days. Kind of, but not really. But yeah, I think that was the best advice because it has stuck with me today. It's carried through, you know, my time and experience as a designer. To be curious, that is who we are as designers. We are continuously pushing the envelope on things, continuously researching, developing, and understanding our experience within space and how that relates to humanity and society. And so curiosity has to always exist. And that just in general is something that I try to stick by within my own practice every single day, personally and through work. So yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Both are really great answers. I think I'll start with the worst, and I have to agree with Stephen. As a firstborn Capricorn, perfectionist Latin woman, if anybody tells me that I can't do anything, that's, you know, that you just make me want to do it more. I mean, that's just like, that's just what's going to happen. So, you know, I guess I haven't really gotten bad advice, but I have gotten little nudges here and there where it's like, are you sure you want to do that? I don't think that's a good idea. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm going to do it anyway. If I felt really strongly about it. I think some of the best advice I've gotten is probably twofold. I think I had kind of an exploratory experience at college. I went in to community college. I was like very well versed in high school, did very well, could have probably went to a multitude of colleges, but just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I come from a very scientific, mathematical type of family, and I'm more artistic in that way. So I really had a hard time figuring out what I wanted to do. So I think focus on doing what you love first, and then worrying about where the money's going to come from, because you'll figure that out later, is probably the piece of advice I could give. And also, don't worry about making mistakes. I mean, because whatever it is, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, and it's not even intentional. Sometimes you have a project, you have vetted a material, it gets installed on a job and it fails. What are you going to do? I mean, shit happens. So it's kind of like, you just have to be easier on yourself. You just won't use it the next time. Don't be so hard on myself is probably, a good piece of advice. And, don't worry about mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes. We're never going to stop making mistakes. So embrace that and just learn from them as you move forward, because that's what makes you stronger in your career and as a designer and as a person as well.
Great pieces of worst and best advice. Has there been anyone that was like a great cheerleader for you that's been like a constant, or have you had any type of mentorship that has been valuable to you, or part of any organization that's just really kind of helped you in your career or helped you navigate a pivot point?
There's been lots of, I think, mentors. Trying to think there have been several people who have been like fantastic influences within like my practice as a designer, and then going into the work that I do now, especially. And I highly encourage that for people. I think mentorship really showed up in our network, like for instance, IIDA, and being able to lean on a community of other designers who are going through the same exact thing as you, or someone who has been through these things and can offer you pieces of advice, that just having somebody that you can go to. And that for me was always super important. I had that through, school. And then of course, my earlier years as a designer, and then even transitioning out of the industry, but still having such a strong connection was super important to me. And I know that I needed that support because immediately as I transitioned out of my design role, I made it known, what I was doing, how I was shifting and pivoting. And so I was still able to keep those relationships with folks as mentors, as, new colleagues or reinvented colleagues, that they can use me as a resource as well too, for certain things, for projects that revolved around photography or digital media and such. So it's always been a priority for me to have some kind of connection to a network. Mentorship innately came from that. And then being a mentor myself, having to, pay it forward to other students who are, coming after me, that I can be a resource to them, show them a different way, and just help them broaden their understanding of what this industry is and what can be offered for them within the industry and outside of it, because there's so many spectrums, so many different avenues. It's not just one thing. And I think that we can be so narrow-minded with that initially as students, because it's like, okay, we have this one idea of what a designer looks like or what an artist looks like. And there's so many different things. And I think if they can just understand that through dialogue, through mentorship, then that's us doing our job. But yeah, I think for me, it's super important. When I branched out as a full-time entrepreneur, that was, again, super important that I needed to have the support of other creative artists and other entrepreneurs, photographers who may not specialize in the work that I do, but at least I know, okay, you do this kind of work, you're niched into this, type of work. If someone comes to me for a project that I don't specifically do, then I can, pass them off to you and you would do the same. So I think it's really just super important to understand that community will open up more doors for you than anything, and being a support for somebody else. Did that answer the question? I feel like I went on a tangent, but yes.
Yeah, you're good. Stephen or Taryn, anybody have like a big cheerleader or some type of mentor that has really kind of spurred and kind of helped you out?
I think for me, it's definitely my mother, number one. I mean, she knows I've been through the gamut between, I guess finishing up school and right before the 2008 economic downturn. So she has always been there for me and kind of pushing me to the next. So throughout my whole life, I can't support anybody. And my mom is always really very good at, look at your accomplishments, because I'm very I'm a little bit hard on myself. So once I get through something, it's kind of like it disappears. But she's like, wait a minute, she's really good at refocusing my brain and saying like, yes, but Taryn, you might not be here right now, but you've done this, and this year. You need to like be grateful for that. And then, eventually you'll get there. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I would definitely say my mother. And I do have a professor at Brookdale Community College, where I went to interior design school, and Celeste Churchill has been amazing. I'm still in touch with her. We're good friends. And, I always think it's interesting to see it from her perspective, because she's always telling me how, oh my God, you're like the most amazing person. You're like, so, you've done so well for yourself after you've been, you graduated Brookdale, which is like, I guess you don't think about yourself in those terms. It's always like, and getting the feedback, I'm like, really? Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I think you're just caught up in the motions sometimes. So, I think those two people are really good about reminding me where I've come from and where I am, and to appreciate the journey kind of at times where I might not be so appreciative of the whole experience.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm lucky enough being in education that I get 200 and some people that pump me up every day, and I specialize in teaching at the first year level, so I see them from the day they walk into our building, we're a very a close cohort of students within the School of Architecture, and so I interact with them on a daily basis from the first year they're in to the day that they leave, and that's everywhere from kind of being in the studio and teaching them, and my office is affectionately referred to as the psychiatrist office. I think everyone has cried in my office, including me, and so yeah, I'm constantly just I have that energy kind of surrounding me at all times, whether it's from my colleagues or from the students. Actually, one of my students is with us tonight, so that's thank you again. Thank you, Stephanie. So yeah, I'm constantly getting that. But then hearing Taryn, I will talk about a recent thing. My dad, he's now living in Texas. My mother passed away this past year, and so he's down there by himself, and I haven't been able to see him because of the pandemic. And recently, he's taken to watching our webcasts and giving me reviews of them. It's like his new hobby. It's great. I'll get 4 or 5 a day, and it's just been really sweet just to hear his feedback from that, and kind of talk to him about those sorts of things, and him continuing to follow my career throughout kind of all the ups and downs and twists and turns. But I think like what Taryn said is you don't necessarily realize kind of what you've been doing and how you've affected other people and the way that they're looking at you. I think that we all need to think about that. But we also all need to get that little boost every once in a while. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's be that for someone, knowing that it's going to come back to you. You know what I mean? Like just try and keep everyone going in that positive direction.
Sorry to hear about your mother, but it's great on the flip side that you can still be close to your dad because of the technology. So
thank you very much.
Jumping in, Taryn, you mentioned 2008. Let's go back, everybody, get in that time capsule. Let's head on back. And what were each of you doing then, and how did the economic crisis kind of shape where you are today, or how you moved about the industry?
I'll go ahead and start. I actually, to be honest, I felt like I didn't really have a true understanding of the economic crisis, because at that time, 2008, I've just graduated high school, and I'm entering into college and working a part-time job at Best Buy in sales. And I didn't really understand the full severity of what a lot of people were experiencing, especially folks who had, had careers and, were trying to shift and navigate through that, or students from, higher education, like graduate students or undergrad who are graduating and then going into like their professional field. So I unfortunately can't speak to that, that experience, but yeah, I would say my experience was just not having a full understanding of it, and really just like getting knee deep into work in general, so, but yeah, that's where I come from.
Yeah, so this is like a topic that I'm well versed in. When I finished at Brookdale, at that point I had to like make an active decision, and I had gotten multiple degrees from Brookdale. I could probably have a master's. I always tell people that I have so many credits from Brookdale. If they issued a master's degree, I would, a doctorate, I probably could get, like just apply for it, because that's how many credits I have. But I needed to work at that point. I had like dabbled in so many different things. So just before that kind of, the economic crash, I had gotten a job for actually a graphic design firm. They did a lot of branding work. They worked a lot with home builders, some of the big name home builders, doing graphics, logos, and they had a small interior design department that did sales offices and model homes and kind of like some multifamily community clubhouse things. So I think that was like an amazing experience for me, because that whole development of almost like this branding aspect of things, and how a graphic designer and an interior designer can kind of work together. And they would always, I would develop the palettes, and then, I'd sit down with the graphic designer and we'd figure out how we can incorporate that into signage and different elements, design elements in the spaces. Unfortunately, because we were so uber focused on the home building industry, which completely, barreled under. I mean, I did end up staying there for a good 5 years. So, it was towards the end of the crisis, but after that, it was very difficult to get a job. It took me 22 months to get a job after that. And it's very hard work. It was finding a job when there are no jobs is a job within itself, if not more. It took resilience. There was moments of darkness, I would say, where my mom came in and kind of like, pushed me along. There was moments where I said, do I really want to do this? The first job, as much as the experience I loved, I wouldn't say the management was the best. So I had that kind of baggage that I was taking on to wherever I was going next, but it was work. It was getting on, the internet every day. It was looking for jobs. It was applying for things. It was not hearing answers. And that takes a toll on you as a person as well, because you feel like very unworthy, very kind of like, why am I doing this? Even though you're a good designer. And for me, after experimenting with multiple fields, like I knew this is what I wanted to do. And then I thought about going into real estate, but like for whatever reason, I never did that. It's like, even though I knew I could have done that easily, this was just where my heart was at always. So I just followed that. And eventually the next job came along, and I took what I had from the first job and was able to apply that in the second job. And so it was difficult. I'm not going to profess to anybody that it was easy for me, at least. I will say that one of the saving graces, and I tell this to anybody who asks me advice, I've spoken at Brookdale before, and I say always, and I know this is a question coming up, but network. Any job that I've ever gotten has come from me having good relationships with my sales reps. Job 1, job 2, job 3, all 3 have come from keeping in touch with my sales reps. You want to know why? Because they're out there. They're on the pavement. They know who's hiring, who's not hiring, what firm might be a nicer firm to work at, rather than, this person is really difficult, or, there's a lot of turnaround there. Are you sure you want to go there? So seeking advice from these different people and kind of bringing them in as your teammates almost, and your comrades in this. And it works for them too, because when you're there, you are more likely to look at their products and maybe specify their products, but it's easier to have the conversation. So from that perspective, I would say, networking was the number one way for me to eventually achieve that job. And then it was resilience and kind of determination to get there. So.
On my side, 2008 would have been the end of my first year of full-time teaching. So I had spent 5 years holding on to part-time teaching and just saying, okay, this is where I want to be. I need to make everything I can do. So I'm waiting tables, I'm doing all the other stuff just to say I need to make it to here. And I got to that point right before everything hit and got the full-time job. And luckily we were a strong program before that, but it became for me, okay, how do I make myself invaluable to where they're not going to get rid of the low man on the totem pole? And then how do I get students? How do I capitalize on kind of or how do I make them understand, okay, yeah, if we want to get past this, you're still going to need education, you're still going to need these things. And so yeah, I was getting it from both sides, as far as, okay, what am I personally going to do, but also how can I help the people who are being affected by this. So we got spikes in our grad program and those things of people going back to school and whatnot, and we were able to make it through. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting time.
Absolutely. And this is one that I'm going to jump in on because I was graduating in the beginning of 2009. I decided, and I don't have an interiors background, I have management bachelor's as well as a marketing bachelor's. And although I was in the business field, you'd think I would have been a little bit more aware, or someone would have had, let me in on the secret that life was not going to be easy after graduation. And unfortunately, I didn't have that. So I graduated and, I found a job, but it wasn't anything exciting or prestigious or overly lucrative. At that point I had to move back in with my parents. So, if any of you have had to do that before, it's okay. I mean, that has kind of been a trend that's been happening. And I don't know, Stephen, if you're seeing that with students that are graduating, that they move home for a little while, or they just kind of get their bearings where they can save, where they can start paying on their student loans when those start to come due. But yeah, there's going to be times where you're going to have to take something that's maybe not exactly perfect or exactly what you wanted, just to get some of those experiences. And that's not bad either, because you can pull different things. Like from my first not so wonderful job, there was a lot of customer service. There was a lot of work ethic that I was able to pull. And then you leverage that into other parts and you sell yourself for the next job. So that's part of the, that interview process that you'll go through. So have any of you guys ever had a job where maybe it wasn't the most ideal, it wasn't the right time, you had expectations of it, being knocked out of the park, and it fell very, very short?
I mean, working at Best Buy is not the most ideal job ever, but ironically, it's taught me a lot on a sales perspective, and really selling yourself, and really just, I found a lot of value in, and this was something that Best Buy pushed as like a company, culture wise, was to really build like trust, and building trust through sales. And so that concept really didn't resonate until I was an entrepreneur and had to embody that conceptually, and, just on like an everyday understanding. Like you have to come off as trustworthy. And how do you engage with a potential client for them to potentially buy something from you, or, connect with you, just in general. So I think that for me was, yes, not the most desirable job, but it taught me a lot about building trust and relationships with clients, selling, something to someone who really needs something, and understand what their needs are first, before, trying to get them to go in another direction that may not be suitable for them. So that's what I would probably just kind of highlight there. It's really just building trust.
Well, I mentioned the second job. It wasn't fantastic. But I think one of the reasons I got hired is because we a very small firm of like a handful of people, were working on a very large hospital. And I guess like this is part of the keep your mind open message, is that hospital, on my list of 10 things, number 1, maybe a hotel. Number 11, a hospital. So, I know that this is like, people excel at this and they get really into it, but for me, that just was like not my gig. It's just like, was not. However, what I learned through the process of that, the interaction with the architect, and the two of us really were like in tune with picking selections and kind of moving through the different spaces, and was invaluable for me, because at that point, after I had completed the project, and I had stayed at that firm for about 3 years through, a lot of chaos, but it was like, if I can do a hospital, like basically by myself, I can do anything, right? So, even though I went into it like, oh, I don't really want to do, like it's a hospital, I don't want to do a hospital, but I'm like, okay, well, what can I take from this? And I definitely feel that, it was a stepping stone for me, because without that, I couldn't be here. So everything like has a reason. And I think that sometimes it's way farther down the line that you find out what that, it might be a year, 2 years, 10 years, who knows, but you're like, oh, that was the message I was supposed to get. And now I get it. Now I understand why all these things kind of like, happen. So, that definitely wasn't the most ideal job, but I did learn a lot from it. So I guess you have to be aware of those jobs that you might, maybe you don't want to stick around as long as maybe I did. And I felt like I had to, because I hadn't had a job in so long, so be aware, but do your best always, and then move on, because there's plenty of people who want to hire you. You just never know.
Can I just interject really quick, because the healthcare in general. So yeah, I worked for a healthcare firm, and that taught me that I was not a healthcare designer. Period. Point blank. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough that I started teaching early on, and so I haven't really had to put up with too many jobs that didn't make me happy or didn't make a lot of sense. Like even early on, I mean, I've done a lot of different things. Like I made candy in Savannah for a while. Like I was just finding the jobs. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, and it got me through. I was working 3 or 4 jobs at once while still going to school, but they were all I made them fun. And so I unfortunately don't have an answer. I don't have a bad story.
That's okay, you don't have to. While we're wrapping up the last couple of questions, if anyone that is with us live wants to drop any messages into the chat, any questions for any of our panelists, please feel free to do so. So my panelists, has anyone ever been laid off, furloughed, fired? You don't have to go into the story. You don't even have to specify, but have you ever experienced any of those things? What has it taught you? You can take that over whatever direction you want to go.
I'll start. I will say that I've never been laid off. I have not been furloughed, but I sort of fired myself because of my big mouth. And I wouldn't even say big mouth, but I really was just at a point of just being completely honest and transparent about where I was in my personal life and what I was starting to feel work-wise. And knowing that I did not want this kind of work environment to exist for me, knowing that this was not the type of work that I felt fully aligned with. And so, just being part of specific projects that really didn't make me jazzed at all, I was completely upfront and blunt with my boss at the time, and was very honest and told her how I felt, and she kind of had a mutual understanding and let me go. And it was at that point, and this was 2018, the end of that year, 2019, I said, well, if I'm going to explore entrepreneurship, it's now or never. And that was the perfect push into the water that I needed. Being fired, being let go into something that I had no idea what I was about to get into, but has been the best decision, best exploration thus far. It was in that moment that I took the opportunity of like, okay, here's the time. Here is what all of the things that I've been feeling leading up to this moment, I now have the ability to explore. So why not? Why not take the chance, see how it goes? I have a fantastic network of designers that I can lean on through this community. Thankfully, I've built incredible relationships with folks since internship level up until, professional practice. I don't have to worry about getting a job because I know that would never be an issue for me. So why not just take the chance on what you actually want to do? And so I did that, and it's been the best decision. And I think it's really just about being upfront and honest, like what you're feeling. There's a reason for that. There is something moving and shaking in your spirit that's telling you this might not be it. So exploring the other thing is extremely frightening, but it's the most fulfilling thing. And it still is a frightening experience. Like there are so many ups and downs and like unknowns to this. And as I grow, and I'm still very much in the incubator phase, but I'm just rolling with the punches. I'm preparing myself more and more. I'm developing myself professionally more and more on a business level so that I can like not have to roll with the punches, but be prepared for when things come. I can, pivot how I need. But other than that, yeah, that was sort of my firing myself, but firing myself into greatness or, fulfillment, if you will. So bad, but good thing in turn.
Emily is asking in the chat, what was the sign or realization that you found to drive you to pivot?
I'm a big podcast listener, and I think I was truly just like preparing myself to be fired or to leave my job in general at the end of that year. I just knew it. I felt it. I was constantly listening to entrepreneurial podcasts, listening to the same story of how people got to this moment of unfulfillment within their workplace and decided to take a leap of faith. But just understanding that and hearing different stories, people were sharing resources and just tips on what to do to prepare yourself for that level. And that urge just continued to grow. And there was one podcast in particular, and this woman shared a story of her working at like a Verizon store and how she wasn't able to do the type of creative work that she wanted because her job structure didn't allot her that time. And that's why I said before, like building in leisure time is super important for me. That's how I find balance, because it gives me opportunity to think creatively so that I can do other types of works. But outside of that, just hearing that alone was like, oh my God, this is what I have to do. Like, I know it keeps showing up. I'm gonna go ahead and take the plunge. I just don't know what it looks like. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I swear to God, I like had this major F up on a project, and I was like, this is what's gonna get me fired. I just know it. I feel it. And I had a discussion with her. I'm like, look, I know that I'm having these issues with this project. If you can find a designer who is super passionate, and please don't take this the wrong way, anyone, if you can find a designer who is super passionate about this work, please find her and hold her, because I'm not it. I said that. And we both just had such a mutual understanding. And the best part about this is I have such a strong relationship with this firm as well now, because I did their entire rebranding imagery and the architecture firm that I previously worked at before that. So for me, it's just being honest and upfront. It will lead you. If the relationships are solid, they will always be there, So sorry if that's a tangent again.
Yes, and yes. Laid off, furloughed, fired. But I think that I grew from every experience that I had. I think part of it was staying, I stayed at a place too long. It was one of those things where, I'm I'm kind of like a loyal person. And especially if I'm working on a very big project, like I feel like dedicated, like it's like my baby. So like, how do I walk out? How do I walk out on the client? How do I walk out on the architect who knows, like we talk to each other multiple times, like, how do you do that? So it was always just about like, I just got to make it to the end. I got to make it to the end. But, I guess those experiences, and some of them, like I would wish not to have, I guess. But, my mom was always, again, back to mom, she's always like, oh, she understood where I was coming from. These were not easy work environments. These were not people that I was dealing with that had a full head on them, we'll just say. So she was always like, well, Taryn, in the end of the day, did you do your best? That's what you need to concentrate on. What can you do better from this? How can you learn from this? Because, unfortunately, sometimes life is wonderful and sometimes life is not easy. It's not, unicorns and kittens. So there's all of these things that kind of happen that you are like, just working through. And it wasn't the end of the world. But I felt okay, confident with myself thereafter, because I knew I did my best. I knew I did my best work, and I didn't feel bad about that. So although it's not an easy thing to kind of swallow, and some of it was economical, and some of it, I guess, was just diverse personalities. But I think that just being honest and asking yourself, always just do your best, kind of helps you push through that, because there'll always be something else. There'll always be something else. You just have to want it enough to go after it.
And I'm going to jump in there and just be like, yes to some of those questions for me. But, there's been a silver lining, and very honestly, for me, it's been IIDA. And like, as when the pandemic hit and I was let go, I made a pivot into a different role at the beginning of 2020. And because of the pandemic, it didn't pan out and I was permanently laid off. You have some feels right away, and that's okay. But then you realize, like, yes, I was doing good work. I brought my best self, or you kind of look back and like, no, this is where things maybe wasn't exactly perfect. And for me, I found, with IIDA, like I just started leaning in. There was a whole bunch of like student stuff going on, and it's been a saving grace. And I've been to network, and I've been able to see everyone's faces, at least digitally. So, that's been kind of a little blessing in disguise. So we are at our hour mark, and we don't have any more questions in the chat. So I just want to open the floor to the three of you, and just any parting words for anyone who's listening.
Well, I think for me, I would just say again, like if you're out looking for a job, or, I know this isn't a really ideal time in the industry right now. We're suffering a lot of changes, and things are kind of, going in, crazy directions. But I guess you kind of just have to be able to be, pliable to work with the situation, be flexible. Sometimes I get very like, narrow-minded, almost like, I have my blinders on. Like, take the blinders off, listen to people maybe that have different advice, and you don't always have to take that advice, but like maybe it's like, okay, well, maybe it opens a door here, or maybe I'll try networking here. I didn't really think about it that way. So and like I always say, like, networking is everything. I think my sales reps are amazing, and I have like personal close relationships with many of them, and like they've always been very supportive, and they've always helped me find a job. So depend on them. Ask them. Be this is what's going on, this is what I'm looking for, and be proactive about that, especially if you're at a position you don't want to be there. It's going to take you a while. It's not going to be like, oh, the perfect job just drops from the sky, and it might not be the next job. You might have to like jump and then jump again. So you have to be open to all these experiences, embrace them for what they are at that moment. And hopefully you'll be able to move forward in a positive manner that, you can express that during an interview and say, this is what I learned here, and this is why you should hire me, because of all these learning experiences. And this is what I'm going to help bring to the table here at this firm or this particular position.
Sorry, there are sirens and it's really loud. Okay. It's really awful. I can't stand it. To piggyback off of Taryn, I concur with everything you're saying. I'll speak to an entrepreneurial kind of side of things. Sometimes if the work that you're looking for isn't there, don't hesitate to create it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay if the work that you're trying to find it's okay if it doesn't exist. It might not be that avenue that you're looking for. So sometimes you got to put yourself into the mindset and position to build it, to create it. Recognize and identify whatever the needs are, or the I guess where there's something is lacking, and be able to provide and step into that, to create a need for someone. So on that level, I would say, yeah, don't be afraid to explore entrepreneurial endeavors if that is a spirit that you have. But yeah, I would say to other folks as well to really hone in on your network, hone in on community, because that will keep you going. That will offer you support in so many different ways through various avenues of potential jobs that you might fall into, but just anything in general. Like I said, I spoke to Maddie, who is a part of our IIDA network as well. And though I'm not an active member, I still hold solid relationships with women, mostly women in this industry. And it's through IIDA, even on the photography side, like someone had mentioned, or you had mentioned, Taryn, reps, having just really close relationships to reps, because they are in and out of the firms all the time. They know who's hiring, they know what's going on. So the fact that this morning I got a phone call from Maddie, and I'm not in the industry anymore, but she knows that I'm a photographer, and being able to name drop me and speak so highly of me to a firm that she's now working with for branding imagery was incredible. You know what I mean? And it's having that kind of relationship. And that's super important to me. Even on this side of the track of being a creative, I need to know who the creatives are in my community so that we can use each other as a resource. You know, that's how you really build this thing up to be sustainable and to generate and create wealth. And that, again, is a super high priority for me within my business and practice. And if I can be a part of that, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys stole everything I was going to say. But really, it's approaching life, approaching everything you do with your eyes open, and always noticing those moments that maybe you find something that's missing, or something that you can add to a situation, or those things that you can easily make a decision that can lead to something else. Not to sit back, not to be afraid. Look at who your decisions can affect and impact, and be willing to kind of put yourself out there, and great things can come from that.
Awesome. So I want to take the time to say thank you, Stephen, Shakira, Taryn, for your openness and honesty and sharing everything that you shared with us this evening. I also want to take this moment to plug our Connect Mentorship Program. So it's local to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and a couple of little outliers through a couple of different industry groups that we've brought together. And then if you would like to join us next week, we're going to be talking about the financial end of things and how you should handle that. And then in March, we're going to do a mental health march. So we'll talk about how to put yourself in a good headspace, mindfulness, so on and so forth. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.